He's perfectionist, as almost everyone we've discussed would fall into that personality characteristic. They're a perfectionist.
People observed the striking similarity for decades. The same intensity, the same look, and even the same unsettling smile. Ray resisted it by picking a profession other than performing. However, he eventually ceased running in 2024. Hollywood was astonished by his breakthrough performance. Furthermore, Jack's recent admission of what he anticipated demonstrates that he was aware that this day would come. Jack Nicholson had a secret at the start of his life that followed him for almost 40 years without him realizing it. He was born in Neptune, New Jersey on April 20, 1937, into what appeared to be a typical family. But the carefully constructed lies concealed the reality. He was raised to believe that his mother was Ethel May Nicholson and that his older sister June Nicholson had left home to pursue her career in show business. His Aunt Lorraine was even introduced as a sibling. Everyone, including friends and neighbors, played along. Nobody ever spoke in the extended family. Even before he was born, the plan had been established. To ensure that no one back home would learn the truth, June gave birth to him in New York City, far from Neptune. It was a 37-year-old, unwritten agreement. The deception began when June was barely 17 years old. She had landed a job as an Earl Carroll dancer in New York after leaving Neptune. For any young woman at the time, it was a glamorous position. However, she later became pregnant. Don, the father's married ex-boyfriend, would later claim paternity decades later. June's admission that she wasn't totally certain who the father was exacerbated the scandal. Being an unmarried mother was socially disastrous in 1937. It might ruin entire futures, professions, and reputations. June returned home in embarrassment, handed up her child, and consented to spend the rest of her life as his sister. That secret remained hidden until 1974. At the age of 37, Nicholson was on a high after finishing Chinatown and making 15 films in a short period of time. Time magazine was fact-checking every aspect of his life in preparation for a big cover story. Researchers discovered strange gaps in the records during this process. They told Nicholson something he couldn't believe when they called him. It was possible that the man he believed to be his father was still alive. In reality, June was his mother and Ethel May was his grandma. The discovery was made just before the release of the film Chinatown, which is about unsettling family secrets. It was nearly impossible to believe the irony. When Nicholson first heard it, he called his Uncle Shorty and stated, "I got a call from a guy telling me that my father is still alive and that June is my mother instead of Ethel May. I've never heard anything so messed up." Shorty initially denied it until acknowledging its veracity. June and Ethel May had both passed away by that point. Nicholson would never be able to question them about their actions. Prior to this, Nicholson had begun his career in Hollywood in 1955 while working as a mail clerk in the animation division of MGM. He was employed by Tom and Jerry's creators, Joseph Barbera and William Hanna. He even declined their offer of a position as an animator. Rather, he got his first audition thanks to a fortunate break in the mailroom. On August 18, 1958, he made his big screen debut in The Cry Baby Killer. He was 20 years old. An adolescent kidnaps a woman and infant in the movie. It was condensed to just 1 hour and 21 minutes and released as a double feature with another movie. Before making a comeback on DVD in 2006, it was a box office failure and disappeared for decades. Nicholson nearly drowned in 1963 while filming The Terror with Boris Karloff. The weight dragged him under while he was dressed in a bulky military outfit for an ocean scene. The film, which had 5 different directors and began as a 2-day shot using unused sets, took 9 months to complete. Its tumultuous production contributed to its cult status. Nicholson met actress Sandra Knight on that same doomed production. In 1962, they got married, and in 1963, they had a daughter named Jennifer. His marriage was the only one he ever had. Continuing until 1968, low-budget horror movies and the difficulty of landing a consistent acting job characterized those years. He was also writing by 1967. He earned much-needed money by writing the script for the psychedelic movie The Trip, which was about LSD. He co-wrote Head for the Monkees the following year, up to his breakthrough performance in Easy Rider in 1969. These endeavors kept him afloat. He never looked back after that. In a New York diner at the beginning of 1968, Rip Torn was seated across from Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper. They were discussing a recently released film. A inebriated lawyer named George Hansen had been written specifically for Torn. However, in the midst of casual talk and beverages, Hopper began to rant about rednecks he had encountered while researching potential locales in the South. Being a proud Texan, Torn took it seriously. The atmosphere became tense. The words became more incisive. Voices arose. Hopper then reached for a steak knife. The damage was done, but no one was harmed. On that night, Torn left the project. Years later, in 1994, Hopper admitted to Jay Leno that Torn was the one who had stabbed him. Torn was enraged. After suing Hopper, he cleaned his name and received about $1 million. However, his loss was the game of Jack Nicholson. Nicholson took over after Torn left. His life would be changed by the part. With a very high, squeaky Texas drawl, Nicholson portrayed George Hansen. The movie was stolen from its own stars by the picture of him wearing a football helmet, smiling and drinking. When the Academy revealed his Best Supporting Actor nomination, he was 32 years old. Despite having barely cost $360,000 to produce, the film was at the Oscars. Nicholson was more than just a name in low-budget movies anymore. Hollywood had to take him seriously all of a sudden. When Easy Rider debuted in theaters on July 14, 1969, it evolved into more than just a film. For a restless generation, it served as a mirror. Tradition is being abandoned by young Americans. From conformity, from the Vietnam War, George Hansen by Nicholson served as a link between the counterculture and the traditional world. A man who truly belonged to neither but understood both. The movie inspired fashion, music, and lifestyle trends. It contributed to the beginning of the new Hollywood age when riskier, smaller enterprises could compete with major studio films. And that rebellion was now linked to Nicholson's face. He had previously been paid only a few $100s for tiny TV roles and Roger Corman B-movies. In a single summer, Easy Rider altered that. With $41.7 million in the U.S. alone, the film brought in $60 million worldwide. Payrolls for Nicholson increased to 6 digits. "Your name becomes a brand," he said to his agency, expressing his desire for unconventional assignments. "You take on 31 different responsibilities and become Campbell's soup." He started to be compared to James Dean and Marlon Brando. Nicholson wasn't a simple writer. He assisted in editing it after it was shot. Dennis Hopper needed to craft a narrative out of 80 hours of unprocessed video. After his character came, Nicholson worked alongside editor Henry Jaglom, concentrating on the parts. It was uncommon for a supporting actor to be thus involved. It provided Nicholson with an inside look at filmmaking which would be beneficial to him in the years to come. In 1970, there were 5 simple parts. Nicholson portrayed Robert Dupia, a former pianist who couldn't fit in anywhere and was hiding among oil workers. To him, it was personal. For male characters, critics hailed it as a breakthrough. Men on screen rarely displayed such emotion. Nicholson received 4 Oscar nods for the movie, including Best Actor. One scene was made famous, echoing an actual dispute Nicholson had at a Sunset Strip eatery years prior. Dupia orders toast in a diner through a succession of ridiculous substitutions. Mike Nichols' daring and direct examination of sex carnal knowledge was published in 1971. Annoyance and Aging. Over the course of 25 years, Nicholson transformed Jonathan from a brazen college student to a resentful, helpless man. For its period, the language was startling. The part was one of his top 3 performances. Then, in 1973, Nicholson played Billy Badass Bodowski in The Last Detail. A young seaman who stole $40 from a charity box was escorted to prison by a Navy lifer. After accounting for inflation, that came to almost $277. Nicholson earned his third consecutive Oscar nomination by giving the role a streak of generosity, comedy, and disobedience. In 1974, Chinatown, a classic, came next. Nicholson portrayed Jake Gitz, a private investigator, discovering a network of family secrets and deceit. The movie received 11 Oscar nominations. There were pyrotechnics on the set. When a game went into double overtime, Nicholson, a die-hard Lakers supporter, once kept the entire crew waiting for more than an hour. A basketball-disinterested Roman Polanski barged into his trailer, snatched up the TV, and tossed it out. Nevertheless, the movie seemed to be fueled by attention. One of the best films of the new Hollywood era is still Chinatown. It wasn't simply Randall McMurphy that Jack Nicholson acted like. He lived him. He spent enough time inside a real mental institution to feel its walls closing in order to get ready. He closely examined patients, noting their movements, speech patterns, and tics while no one was around. He listened to the quiet in the morning and the faint noises of the ward at night. After spending weeks inside, Nicholson started to wonder what sanity actually meant because the distinction between acting and reality became so hazy. When the cameras stopped, crew members saw that he didn't always leave McMurphy behind. That erratic energy held on to him even during breaks, as though the character had moved in and closed the door. By March 29, 1976, the risk had been profitable. After 4 prior nominations, Nicholson eventually won his first Oscar for Best Actor at the 48th Academy Awards. "I guess this proves there are as many nuts in the Academy as anywhere else," he added, smiling, as he stood on stage for less than a minute. It was irreverent, brief, and unforgettable, the epitome of a McMurphy moment. He solidified his spot among the greats by defeating some of the most formidable opponents the Best Actor category had ever seen. However, it was more difficult to leave McMurphy behind than it was to win the statue. Even when Nicholson was not on site, friends and relatives noticed glimmers of the persona. Both the edge and the charm were present. McMurphy was an erratic man who may attempt to strangle someone one moment while grinning the next. Nicholson's actual demeanor was infused with such gloom, making it difficult to distinguish between the performance and the man. His loved ones started to fear that the confrontation and disobedience were no longer merely for show. The movie itself became well known. On a budget of only $3 million, it made almost $108 million in the United States when it was released on November 20, 1975. It surpassed Jaws as the year's second biggest grossing film. It accomplished something that has only been accomplished by one other movie in history at the Oscars. It took home all 5 major prizes: Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Furthermore, Nicholson never truly saw McMurphy go. Many of his best performances were modeled after this part: the brilliance, the savage defiance of a few decent guys, and even the jagged edges of Melvin Udall in As Good as It Gets all showed traces of McMurphy and Jack Torrance's insanity. He developed into the most alluring rebel on TV, the man who could enchant you while demolishing everything in his path. In addition to permanently altering his career, McMurphy may have also altered him. Obsessiveness was a well-known trait of Stanley Kubrick. That preoccupation became something the cast and crew of The Shining would never forget on the shoot. More than 400 takes are allegedly used for the scene in which Jack Nicholson smashes through the toilet door. Though marginally different, the truth is still quite harsh. Just that scene, which shattered 60 actual doors, took 3 days to shoot. Kubrick desired excellence. Nicholson was forced to spend hours at a time in a state of complete insanity. With one question in mind, the filmmaker persisted: how can we surpass the previous record in this regard? This was not an isolated incident. The Guinness World Record for the most takes in a single scene was even broken by Kubrick. A scene in the kitchen was recorded 148 times. "It was the most frustrating experience of my career," Nicholson said of the entire process. It was more than just the monotonous repetition. Stand-ins were not permitted by Kubrick. Nicholson was always tense because he had to be present for lighting setups as well. Jack Torrance's acting felt horrifyingly real as a result of that pressure. Then came the statement that would go down in horror history as the most well-known. This is Johnny. Wasn't in the script or Stephen King's book. The Tonight Show, where Ed McMahon used to announce Johnny Carson, is where Nicholson took it from. It had been heard in a familiar and comfortable setting by millions of Americans. Nicholson turned it into a threatening thing. When he saw it through the fractured wood, Kubrick realized it was too strong to leave out of the movie. Johnny Carson no longer owned the line. It belonged to the horror genre. There was a lot of life on set. At moments, the environment felt hazardous because of Kubrick's mind games and Nicholson's method acting. Nicholson would drive himself into a rage by pacing and swinging the axe before the takes. Shelley Duvall's hair began to fall out due to extreme stress. She once held clumps of it in her palms and showed them to Kubrick. Kubrick deliberately brought her to tears, thinking that only genuine fear would be captured on film. Crew members occasionally became concerned about what they were witnessing because Nicholson's anger, whether genuine or fake, was so compelling. However, Kubrick made sure to keep 6-year-old Danny Lloyd safe on the site. The youngster had no idea that he was in a scary film. They were filming a family drama, Kubrick informed him. To ensure Lloyd wouldn't witness anything frightful, life-size dummies were used in place of the performers whenever a scene appeared to be unpleasant. He just watched heavily manipulated material that lacked any aspects of fear. When he eventually saw the entire film as a teenager years later, he discovered that the twins he had played with were ghosts and that his father in the film was attempting to murder him with an axe. It was dangerous for Nicholson to take on this job. He had already won an Oscar in 1980 for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and a few years later, he would win it again for Terms of Endearment. Horror was viewed by critics as lowbrow entertainment and was not regarded as serious art. Despite receiving negative reviews, The Shining was nominated for Razzie Awards for Worst Actress and Worst Director. Nicholson's act was deemed excessive by some. However, it eventually became his most recognizable part, demonstrating that horror could have the same impact as any drama. It would be impossible to discuss Nicholson's career without mentioning Angelica Houston. His birthday party on Mulholland Drive in 1973 marked the start of their 17-year romance. Houston, who had just returned from London at the age of 22, was already enamored with Nicholson after watching Easy Rider. He was 36. The bad guy of Hollywood. Even in those early days, there were indications of trouble, even as they danced into the night. Nicholson had to meet his ex, so he canceled their first meeting a few days after they had been scheduled. That started to happen frequently. They starred in John Huston's Her Father's 1985 film Preeti's Honor. Nicholson and Kathleen Turner were the main characters in this gloomy comedy about mob assassins and the mobster's daughter, Angelica. The film made $26 million, although it cost $16 million to make. Angelica won Best Supporting Actress, and it received 8 Oscar nominations. Their genuine chemistry lit up the screen as their personal and professional lives briefly coincided. When Nicholson began an affair with Rebecca Broussard in 1989, that came to an end. A waitress who became a model, 18 years his junior. 2 of Broussard's children, Ray in 1992 and Lorraine in 1990, would be born. Houston learned while they were still dating. Nicholson continued to live his life as usual and didn't break up with her. Hollywood kept it a secret and the shame was unbearable. The ping pong paddle controversy followed, described in explicit detail how Nicholson used the paddle in a sexual encounter with a younger woman. It was worse because of the timing. Broussard's pregnancy had recently come to Houston's attention. This went beyond simple treachery. It was humiliation in public. At last, Houston lost it. She let go almost 2 decades of rage when she barged into Nicholson's office and assaulted him. Nicholson did not defend himself. Later on, he said that he thought he earned it. Houston even expressed gratitude to him for allowing her to strike him. That was the end of it. After years of emotional abuse, the Hollywood bachelor, who had made fun of the prospect of marrying her, was now forced to face the repercussions. In terms of affection, Jack Nicholson was already a Hollywood icon when he played Garrett Breedlove. However, he wasn't the insane mastermind or the dangerous rebel this time. He was an elderly astronaut and an unabashed charmer who unintentionally fell in love with Shirley MacLaine's Aurora Greenway. He was still charming, But he now displayed a gentleness and fragility that audiences had never seen in him before. The movie made $165 million worldwide and was only surpassed by Return of the Jedi in box office receipts. As 1983's second biggest hit, it received 11 nominations and won 5 Oscars, including Best Picture. With a cunning quip in his acceptance speech, Nicholson's own triumph for Best Supporting Actor demonstrated to the public that he could dominate the stage, shine in an ensemble, and succeed in a romantic drama. Wearing Colonel Jessup's outfit, Nicholson appeared in a courtroom 9 years later, prepared to utter a statement that would reverberate throughout popular culture indefinitely. He didn't simply yell, "You can't handle the truth," in A Few Good Men. He set it off. Rob Reiner, the director, shot it from every perspective. But every frame was electrifying because to Nicholson's volcanic delivery, he received his 11th Oscar nomination as a result of the film's high box office receipts and critical acclaim. That one instant became more popular than the movie itself, making its way into memes, comedic sketches, and casual conversations. It was more than a line. It was a significant cultural event. Some questioned if Nicholson could still carry a film by himself by 1997. As Good as It Gets grinned and growled in response, and Nicholson made people despise him by portraying Melvin Udall, a gifted yet resentful novelist suffering from obsessive-compulsive disorder. Feel sorry for him, and, in a way, love him. It was the final movie to win both lead actor Oscars at the same event, with him receiving his 3rd Oscar and Helen Hunt receiving her 1st. Despite having a $50 million budget, it generated nearly $314 million globally. Nicholson was not fading at 60. He was demonstrating that he was still capable of being a memorable person. Batman followed in 1989. Furthermore, Nicholson's Joker wasn't merely a success. The history text benefited much from it. He struck an agreement rather than accepting a one-time $10 million compensation. $6 million up front, along with a portion of the box revenue and sales of Joker memorabilia. The toys sold like wildfire, and the movie brought in $401 million worldwide. After everything was said and done, he made almost $90 million, around $194 million in today's currency. He even obtained benefits like regular breaks, Lakers game attendance, and shooting schedules. It was not just a part. It was a master class in negotiating deals in Hollywood. Morgan Freeman and Nicholson were matched on the bucket list in 2007. The two men were racing through their final exploits before passing away. It resonated. Making more than $175 million on a budget of $45 million. The movie's author, Justin Zackham, coined the phrase bucket list. Bucket list. Even though no one was aware of it at the time, Nicholson thought that the job was a silent farewell. However, how do you know his subsequent movie from 2010 was a complete failure? Despite having a $120 million budget, it only managed to reach $48.07 million globally. It was criticized. Additionally, the loss was enormous, up to $140 million. It would be his final movie. After 3 years, rumors started to circulate. According to reports, Nicholson's inability to recall his lines led to his retirement. Although his friends rejected it, the allegations were only strengthened by his lack of presence in Hollywood. Nicholson remained away from roles, telling Vanity Fair that he really didn't want to perform again. His only appearances these days are at Lakers games, where he used to play every season. He made a comeback for a playoff game in 2023, wearing sunglasses and grinning. After missing over 2 years, he was dubbed the Lakers' fortunate charm by fans, and his memory was shrouded in yet another shadow in 2023. In her first public statement, his estranged daughter, Tessa Gorin, said that Nicholson had never given her any recognition. She likened her upbringing to that of orphan Annie, whose father was both hugely renowned and completely absent. It served as a reminder that even legendary figures leave unfinished tales behind for a guy who dedicated so much of himself to the film. There is more to Jack Nicholson's legacy as an Oscar winner than just his accolades. The point is that staying so wonderful for that long is just not conceivable. 12 nominations. No other male actor in Academy Award history has more than that. He was in office for 33 years, from 1970 to 2003. This is when it becomes even more bizarre. He and Michael Caine are the only two performers in history to receive nominations in every decade from the 1960s to the 2000s. Given how distinct each of Nicholson's Oscar victories was, his streak is all the more remarkable. He stunned everyone in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in 1976. In terms of affection, he both won and lost hearts in 1984. By 1998, he was making a new and better version of himself. He showed 4 distinct sides in 4 different decades. His total is still included by Guinness World Records. Best Supporting Actor received 4 nominations. Best Actor gets an 8, all during that incredible period between 1970 and 2003. At age 65, he received his last nomination. Evidence that he was never subject to Hollywood's age restrictions, and Ray Nicholson comes next. Talent isn't the only factor in his success. It has to do with something completely unrelated. People are unnerved by the striking similarity to his father. Originally uninterested in performing, Ray was born in February 1992 to actress Rebecca Broussard. His dream was to work as an astronaut. He later considered sports management. He avoided contact with the company that gave his family its name for many years. With Smile 2, everything changed in 2024. Although the performance was good, there was one particular aspect that made the audience shudder. The smile? That same crazy, eerie smile that Jack had etched into the annals of film with The Shining in 1980. Once more, it was displayed on enormous billboards, but this time it featured his son's face. Ray acknowledged that everything changed for him at that moment. I don't have to hide anymore, he reminded himself. He was still his father's son, even if he acted. Fans observed that side-by-side comparisons were exploding on social media. Critics referred to it as an unsettling homage. According to Ray, his father is his hero. He recalls watching him, learning from him, and having dinner with him every night. He claims that this is how he came to understand what it is to be human. As for Jack, he has always talked about his son with pride. He warned a publication back in 2008 that Ray might keep things to himself. Fife. No one could convince him otherwise once he made up his mind. Regardless of what people thought, he would persevere and take care of business. The end effect is a Hollywood tale that seems almost otherworldly. For decades, one guy dominated the Oscars. Someone else who brings his face, his demeanor, and even his insanity to the screen. Because it's in his DNA, not because of a casting call or a contract.